Oreo. I'm with Chris Mangano. Look at Chris. Look at how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Ocellus Tech.
Ocellus Tech, correct.
Cool. Tell us about it, man. It's Chris. It's funny. You and I have talked offline a bunch about cybersecurity and some of the threats out there and people not really understanding. You probably taught me more in an interview from over a year ago or about a year ago about cyber threats than anyone prior to you. Just conversationally talking about it. So tell us about Ocellus.
Permanent part of our landscape these days, unfortunately, for the cyber threat management work that we do. But Ocellus Tech is a division of an organization called Imperium. Mm-hmm. And Imperium was founded in 1993 by an individual named Ryan Smith, mm-hmm. who came up through the nonprofit world, understanding all of the challenges and work that needed to be done within nonprofits and some of the operational efficiencies that through the years he learned needed more attention than others, mm-hmm. and created Imperium to create economies of scale, mm-hmm. and a consortium and constellation system that allows nonprofits that participate in that model to leverage the different things that are now becoming available to them as part of their involvement. And it's grown tremendously from 1993 to where Ryan is today. It's a $200 million organization.
Wow.
Yeah, did a fabulous job and continuing to grow.
Yeah.
And Ocellus Tech was created because we were a pre-established group of IT professionals that had a proven model for delivering IT management, mm-hmm. both remotely as well as on site. Mm-hmm. And Ryan saw and recognized the importance of being able to meet the needs of his participating nonprofits in a way that would create those efficiencies as well. So, all of the other efficiencies that he's been able to deliver successfully through this model now expands very effectively into the delivery of IT management. And part of that is cyber threat management, which is a big part of what we do.
Yeah. So one of the things, Chris, that you and I talked about offline is that, as COVID-19 has kind of evolved and the pandemic has caused people to work from home, telecommute, what has changed in terms of cybersecurity, cyber threats, managed IT services over the last, say, 6 or 8 months?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of things began to take more formal shape a few years ago. In March of 2017, Governor Cuomo in New York created something called the DFS, Department of Financial Services, DFS 500 regulations. Mm-hmm. So if you're an institution, an organization, predominantly in the financial sector, but it goes far beyond that, and you operate in any capacity out of New York, mm-hmm. you're governed by the DFS 500 regulations. So this affects, obviously, credit unions, lending institutions, banks, financial advisory groups, but it's also charitable foundations, a number of government institutions. There are other vertical sectors and markets that are affected by this. So sure. DFS 500 basically makes it mandatory now. It's no longer a choice where if you're the custodian or guardian of data, mm-hmm. and it's your responsibility to manage that data responsibly, you are required in New York under DFS 500 to have an annual security risk assessment, mm-hmm. also have an annual pen test, which is a penetration test, and the results of that cannot be reported out to the board of directors or the governing body of that organization. It must be reported out by a garden variety officer, operations officer, or CFO.
Okay.
It must be reported out by chief information security officer, what's called a CISO. Mm-hmm. Most organizations don't have a CISO laying around on staff. It's a very coveted and difficult position to maintain in today's cyber threat world. So organizations generally are aligning themselves with groups like us to help assist in developing cyber threat management policies. So what we've seen with the DFS 500 regulation is other markets, other sectors are learning from what Governor Cuomo put into place for these areas, and things like manufacturing, legal, healthcare, and especially education are making it mandatory now. So, K through 12 is a big threat sector. FERPA, which is the Family Education Rights Privacy Act, is changing and evolving just like the DFS 500. FERPA is beginning to recognize that schools can no longer do best effort to manage cyber threat policies and procedures. They are going to be held to the same standards similar to what I just described the DFS 500 involving.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about FERPA and the whole idea of the security threats in K-12, Chris, because I don't think, for the viewing audience, parents out there parents, teachers, administrators realize how that threat could affect their children.
Sure. Well, just yesterday, the city of Hartford fell under attack. Actually, the attack was launched over this past Labor Day holiday weekend. Ransomware was successfully deployed, detonated, and prevented the city of Hartford from opening yesterday remotely. Most of the city of Hartford schools were scheduled to go live first day of school yesterday with telecommuting, distance learning, and they were not able to do that because of a successful breach on the part of the threat actors over this Labor Day weekend. So the distance learning and in general, businesses of all areas, sectors, and markets that are now working remotely through WebEx and Zoom and Microsoft Teams and the various tools that are out there that are allowing us to do this. It's wonderful to be able to do that and work remotely, but it opens a whole new slew of doors for the threat actors and the folks that are behaving nefariously to do things that they were doing before, but now they have a whole new layer of being able to compromise your environment. So K through 12, this is not new. City of Hartford just yesterday, but there have been countless organizations, schools throughout the country, and in New Jersey specifically, that have fell victim to a variety of different types of attacks. We support the New Jersey School Board Association, which anchors 584 public school districts in the state of New Jersey. Okay. And the New Jersey School Board Association, as the agency of record managing their IT and assisting with cyber threat management, we've been able to now help and assist a number of different schools throughout New Jersey to develop and advance internal controls, policies, and procedures and help them lock down their environment. The city of Hartford was able to respond. They are now open today. They missed one day, and the reason they missed only one day was because they invested 1 year ago over $500,000 in a cyber threat management program that put in place various tools that allowed them to catch, isolate, and contain this threat that just was launched over this past holiday weekend.
That's great.
Yeah, and they were able to correct it rather quickly within a few days, working through the weekend, and today they're open for the students to be able to go to school or be in their living room.
Did they end up paying them ransomware, or don't you know?
It's unknown for certain, but
I don't think they make that stuff public.
No, they don't make it public, and the short answer is no. They generally don't pay, and especially if you have a threat management, a cyber threat management set of tools in place that allows you to forensically look back. Digital forensics is a big part of how did this happen? Right. When and how did the breach occur? Can we isolate it? can we then do a restore of data to bring us back to just before the moment of compromise?
Right.
And that was what they were able to do.
Great.
Yeah.
You know, Chris, before we went on the air, one of the questions I was asking you is, do people understand, when you talk about Microsoft Teams and Zoom and WebEx and everything else, understand how some of the data that they're transmitting back and forth, forget the video conferencing and all that stuff, that's one thing. But transmitting data or files back and forth, do they realize how, if they're at home, that an organization, large, small, and you mentioned this to me several months ago, that small businesses need to develop a plan of action, a risk mitigation plan, a cyber risk management plan. And a lot of times they don't do that. They don't come up with a plan until it's too late. Yeah,
it's unfortunate that oftentimes it won't happen to me is the mindset. And this is not really, cyber threat management controls and policies, procedures, advancement is not insurance. Insurance, that is optional. We've often said, well, I'll take my chances, and chances are it won't happen to me, my organization, my school district. But in today's day and age, it isn't a question of if, but when you will be compromised, because the advancements on the threat actor side of the line are becoming more and more advanced, and oftentimes the bad guys are a step or two ahead of the good guys. Sure. And listen, the FBI and a number of other organizations are regularly recruiting and trying to bring in sometimes some of the most notorious criminals that have actually flipped over to the good side. The white hats. Sure, we've got the Death Star and going back to Star Wars and George Lucas, right?
Exactly.
So, but the telecommuting, the distance learning, if it's a school setting, if you're working remotely through WebEx, through Zoom, through Microsoft Teams, that tool and platform is allowing you to present yourself to your colleagues and to your clients through solid audio and video content, but you've also you also have to think about the work that you're doing file-wise, data-wise, and as you pointed out a few minutes ago, transmitting that data through either a virtual private network, whatever. We won't go into the weeds over the different models that allow that to happen, but having in place a solid mechanism and IT architecture that is modeled out properly is critical today. It's critical.
Yeah. We're going to have to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about how to start a planning process